Hello there, Mr. Lee here, and today we're going to talk about Saturnalia, the festival. It's quite an appropriate day today. Well, I don't normally talk about the day on which I'm recording my videos, but today is the 21st of December, the winter solstice, and also in this year, 2020, the winter solstice falls on a day when Jupiter and Saturn, the two planets, are almost next to each other in the night sky. And both these factors are quite appropriate for the festival of Saturnalia. So what I'd like you to do at the start of this video is to look at the source on the first image here and to see if you can pick out as much of it as possible. Just describe it and to think what the Saturnalia festival, the festival of Saturnalia, the festival of Saturn, what is it about? Okay, now do pause the video if you need, and I will say that every now and again. If I do give you a task, I'll just make sure I give you some time to do it, and when you're ready, once you've jotted down some ideas, then off we go. Okay, I'm not going to tell you all about Saturnalia just off this image, because actually by the end of the lesson you should hopefully be able to explain a lot of the things that appear in this image. But firstly, if I can just first wish you Yo Saturnalia or Io Saturnalia. That's what the Romans say when they greet each other around the festival of Saturnalia. Io Saturnalia, like happy Saturnalia, or it's a sort of greeting. Like we would say Merry Christmas or Happy Easter or things like that. So, this is what we're going to be exploring today, the Festival of Saturn. We're going to think about how it's celebrated, why is this an appropriate festival, and whether you enjoy a festival like this. And of course, we will come back to the slide, the image that you've seen in the previous slide as well. Now, Saturn, the god of Saturn. What is Saturn about? Saturn is about time, all right? His Greek name is Chronos, from which we get the word chronology. So Saturn, the Roman version of it, has kind of merged and became the same thing as Chronos. The Romans like to identify their gods and compare them to Greek versions, and the Greek like to just sort of merge their gods in the Roman version. It's not like one side starts the process, but over time we start talking about the Greek version of a Roman god or goddess, or vice versa. And here Saturn, whose Greek version is called Chronos, is the god of time. He is the king of the Titans. He is a titanic god. I hope it doesn't confuse you. He's got nothing to do with ships, but you might know what that ship is. It's the Titanic, right? So he's the king of the earlier generation of gods called the Titans. The gods that we tend to study about in this course are called the Olympian Gods. They are of the next generation to the Titanic gods. So gods like Jupiter or Juno or all the other members of the crew are Olympian gods, unlike Saturn, who is a Titan god, Titanic god. By the way, some of this information will come up on the next slide, so if you're frantically noting it down and pausing it, that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can always check it against the next slide as well. Right, so next thing that Saturn is in charge of is sowing with an O. Not knitting, no, not that. He's the god of agriculture and he's the god of sowing. In fact, his name is very similar to the Latin word for to sow. So in a way, he's kind of like a personification of sowing. He was once also a ruler over an area called Latium. Now, Latium is this area centered around Rome, where it's like the delta of the river. You might see on the image there the river Tiber coming down and cutting this narrow pathway, this valley across the hillside. Well, Latium kind of centers around this valley and, well, I don't want to say delta, but let's say floodplain area in the middle of that image and extending all the way to where the wet Etruscans or Sabines is, just up, like coming up to those areas. And significantly, nowadays and back in the time of ancient Rome, it is where the city of Rome is, in the middle of this floodplain there. So, Saturn ruled over the area before Rome was even known as an entity, before the name of Rome even existed. But it kind of gives some, again, it gives some sort of weight, it gives some sort of history to the area where Rome sits, and is to say that, well, okay, even before Rome actually existed, there's a lot of heavyweights around who's made this area significant already. If you remembered, we looked at Hercules, who has been through here once he's captured the cattle of, who was it? It was the sun god's cattle, wasn't it? And, oh, yeah, that was the point where Cacus stole the cattle. Also, that Romulus chose this site and Aeneas fled to this site. We're about to look at that in more detail now. So, Saturn is a significant player in this area because he was previously a ruler. Okay, well, so Saturn then, here is the sort of overview of who he is. If you need a bit more time to get these notes down, then please do pause the video. Otherwise, we will proceed to look at the Temple of Saturn in Rome. The Temple of Saturn occupies a really significant site in the middle of the Roman Forum. You would see that actually it's a very impressive building. So from the photo on the right hand side of what it remains, those those columns are really, really tall. They kind of have to be tall as well, because if you visited Rome, that area is in the valley. So, you know, if the buildings are not that tall, it doesn't necessarily stand out. It's in the dip of the valley between some of the 7 hills of Rome. If you look at the map, and I'm afraid the the labels have been cut out slightly, but if you can just see where it says Capitoline Rise on the left-hand side of the map, there's a label pointing to a squarish area, and that is the Temple of Saturn. Let me try and narrow it down. So we're talking about between the Basilica Julia, the big middle basilica there, between that and the portico of the 12 gods. It's on the foothills of the Capitoline Hill, where it says Capitoline Rise. That's actually the curved path that goes up the hill towards the Temple of Jupiter, and it's curved because that's quite a steep hill. You can still see that steep hill now, and it's quite a steep curve going up to the modern day. It's the Capitoline Hills Museum that occupies that site now. In any case, the bottom or the foothills of the Capitoline Hill is where this temple is. It's a significant site, and it's the third oldest temple that was established in Rome, after the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, just slightly above it on the hill, and the Temple of Vesta, which you see on the right of that map, that circular building there where it's got the label Temple of V, that's Temple of Vesta, right? So Temple of Saturn is the third one, and actually there's an altar to Saturn which existed long before the temple was built behind it, and I'm sure the altar still serves a function of making sacrifices to Saturn there as well. So this is kind of the focal point where the festival of Saturn, the Saturnalia, would take place. I should also say that it's so significant that actually the Temple of Saturn hosted the treasury. Now, here's a bit of extra information. It doesn't matter if you don't mention this in the exam, but it might help you understanding. Saturn's wife is called Ops, O-P-S, Ops. Not by accident. Ops actually means wealth, and she's the goddess of wealth. And just, I was going to say by chance, but probably not by chance, the treasury of Rome is also housed in the Temple of Saturn. It's housed there quite earlier on. It probably would have a sort of bank within the vault, but later on it serves to store more significant possession rather than serving as the treasury. If you know of the story, yes, of the Temple of Janus, for example, the Temple of Janus also serves a similar function. But anyway, I'm talking about things that you don't need to know for the exam. So if you want to make sure that these information are down as well, it will appear on the next slide. And I should also say that the cult statue of Saturn is also contained within the temple, and his legs were bound with woolen ties to sort of signify the fact that Saturn was usurped and defeated by the gods of the Olympian age of Jupiter. So I'll just give you a bit of time. If you want to pause the video to make sure these notes are down, then that's fine. Okay, I should have said this earlier, of course, but Saturn was the king of the gods until the Olympian gods usurped him. There is a particularly gruesome story about Saturn, what he did when he knew that Jupiter was going to become king of the gods, because this was foretold. So I'll let you research this in your own time if you wish. However, yes, when Jupiter led an uprising of all the main gods that we study as part of this course against the earlier generation of gods, there was a reversal of hierarchy. The people who were previously lower down in the ranking have become the boss, and Saturn has become, well, not very significant at all in the minds or in the religion of the Romans, except of course that Saturn is very significant for our purpose here, because there is a whole festival that celebrates him, and here is the program for the festival. It is generally 1 week long. That varied over time because some emperors wanted to extend it, so you've got longer holiday and more people would be happy about it. Some emperors or some leaders want to shrink it because it's been too long, or they think it's becoming a bit rowdy. But generally, let's say it's about 1 week long, and let's say it's about from the 17th generally to the 23rd of December. The start date of the 17th is quite set, so you could rely on that one. And it's normally around the time of the winter solstice, which coincidentally is the day on which I'm recording this video, the 21st of December. Winter solstice, by the way, the shortest day of the year in terms of daylight hours. Leading up to the winter solstice, the daylights are getting shorter and the nights are getting longer. After the winter solstice, daylight hours are lengthening and darkness hours is shortening. So it's seen as a turning point. And after that, situation becomes more favorable for farmers as well, which is quite significant for what Saturn is the god of. Okay, and we don't really know much about Saturnalia. That's the bottom bullet point there. We don't really have much evidence of it. Poets occasionally allude to it as being a very popular festival. Other than that, well, we know the following things. For For example, that it began with a sacrifice on the first day, led by some of the officials, some of the priests that's been elected to those colleges of priests in Rome. It's quite interesting about the sacrifice. We'll talk about that more in a moment. The legs on the statue of Saturn is untied. I suppose what I meant was that it's not so much the legs were untied, but the woolly cloth that bound the legs of Saturn on his cult statue. And what that signifies is some sort of freedom, some sort of liberation. It also sort of signifies going back to good old days as well. Saturn and the age where Titans ruled the world were seen as the Golden Age, and poets often called it the Golden Age. Poets like Ovid, Virgil both called it the Golden Ages of, well, we might say mythology, but probably history for them. Okay, so businesses are suspended, and people can enjoy themselves. Now let's talk about a sacrifice. It's typically on day one, which is 17th of December. You might expect Roman priests to be performing its official duty with the head veiled, but in this case, he does not. He performs it in the Greek style. He doesn't have a cloth that goes over his head at all. It's seen as slightly rebellious. Some people see it as a connection with Kronos, but I think it's just a sense that normal service is not quite in place during Saturnalia. And we'll see more of that sense of rebelliousness, the unruliness later on as we talk more about what people do. There is a public feast throughout Rome, which is organized by the Senate and paid for by the state. So free food for all. And to make sure that people remember what they're celebrating, a statue of Saturn is often placed at the table. So, what did the people do on Saturnalia? Well, one thing that they might have done more enthusiastically than on other days is gambling. Romans are not really allowed to gamble. However, on a day like Saturnalia or during the festival of Saturnalia, gambling is permitted. So you can see on there an image from a Pompeian house, a fresco of people playing dice. That's quite likely what they'll be doing on Saturnalia if they enjoy that sort of thing. Another custom is gift exchange. So people who know each other will be swapping presents. I doubt there'll be wraps like this, but I can't really find an image of Roman presents being swapped, and I don't think there's any evidence of wrapping, but hey, here we are. There will also be a reversal of hierarchy. What that means is masters will be expected to serve slaves in certain parts of the course. Certainly there'll be a blurring of boundaries. What you see in the image there is a slave wearing a pileus. That's P-I-L-E-U-S, a pileus, a felt cap, sometimes called a Phrygian cap, because I suppose it comes from Phrygia. That's P-H-R-Y-G-I-A. And it's used when slaves get freed. Now, slaves aren't really freed during the course of Saturnalia. I don't know if it is possible to free a slave. I can't answer that question. But what that signifies is that slaves get to enjoy a sense of freedom, get to act a little bit more carefree. Although, if you ask me whether slaves could do anything they want, well, the law still applies in a way, and the master is still nominally a master, and he does remember what you've done during Saturnalia. So my suggestion, if where advising a slave is certainly not to go overboard, even though the customs are relaxed. Okay. What you might see on the day is that the master of the paterfamilias, if you're familiar with that word, the master of the household will wear party dress instead of togas. Roman citizens are allowed to wear togas, but this allows the master to fit in a little bit more. And once the food's been cooked by the cook slave, the leading slave of the household would ask the master to come out and start serving the food to the slaves. And during the feast, this feast that happens at home, so not the one we're talking about earlier on, which is sponsored by the state. This one is what happens within each house. There might also be a master of ceremony, a lord of misrule, if you like, quite often chosen from the lowest or the lower ranking of slaves within a certain household, and he or she will be in charge of the proceedings of that day. So here are the customs for the Saturnalia, and you might see a lot of similarities to do with a certain modern festival here, but if you need more time to get this down, then please do pause for a moment. Okay, Saturnalia typically takes place in the winter, and that kind of makes sense. It fits in with the role of the god of Saturn. He's the god of harvest, so some might say that it relates to the fact that all the harvest is done, but also perhaps it signifies that sowing can be started soon after the festival because there's a turn of weather. All these happiness during the depths of the winter is also quite significant because it marks a turning point in time, right? Remember, Saturn is the god of time, and if you think about it, as daylights turn from reducing or shrinking to lengthening, that's kind of a turning point in terms of time, and that makes it appropriate for Saturn as well. There's certainly a lot of jolliness in this time of coldness and darkness, and what that really does remind me, and perhaps you as well, is the sense of Christmas. Christmas is of course a Christian festival, but the Christians of the 4th century, and essentially Rome became a Christian empire under an emperor called Constantine. It's taken on the festival of Saturnalia, and a lot of traditions within Saturnalia is used to celebrate Christmas. Now, I'm not an expert on Christianity, but a lot of experts of Christianity would suggest that Jesus' birth did not take place in the winter. It's not, for example, a sensible idea for a census to be conducted in the depths of winter, whereupon people will be traveling around the Roman Empire to the birthplace in a time of the year where it's harder to travel, and if you travel by sea as well, quite treacherous. So yeah, given that we can be sure that Jesus was actually born in the depths of winter, we could perhaps suggest that maybe the actual birth date of the actual birth date of Jesus wasn't in December either, but it is certainly what we celebrate on the 25th of December every year, and the fact that this sort of time was chosen to celebrate the birth of Jesus, a lot of the customs of the Saturnalia, which is a festival that takes place very near to the 25th of December on the calendar, has been adopted. In fact, if you speak to people from different backgrounds in terms of the religion, they would say that actually a winter festival is quite a typical thing to have on a religious calendar, and that Christmas perhaps has taken on a lot of the traditions that were already existing for a Christmas festival. So this is the legacy of the Saturnalia, really. Okay, we've had a look at all the things that we need to know and more about the Saturnalia. Let's have a look back at the image that we had at the start of the course. Now, this image accompanied an edition by Tertullius on the years, but also it originated very, very originally from the 4th century AD by a calligrapher called Philocalus or Philocalus. Basically, what we have nowadays, image-wise, is copies of copies of copies. So it certainly looks like a pencil sketch drawing because it is, but certainly the first copy or the original one, our primary source, if you like, is not going to look exactly like that. On the PowerPoint, I've put on a link to the full calendar, so if you want to know more about the images of all the other months except January, which I believe is lost, then you can click on that link on the PowerPoint and find it. Now, one of the things that I'd like you to do while watching this PowerPoint is have a look and see if you can match the description to the number on the diagram. Now, I'm just going to flick over the next slide, and you can see that this diagram is numbered. Perhaps if your work has been said directly by me, then you will have a copy of this diagram that is numbered as well. So, all these bullet points, there are 9 of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, there's 8 of them. It corresponds to the numbers 1 to 8 on the next on the image. So give yourself a bit of time and see if you can match it. And don't feel you need to write all these down or type all this up. Just copy and paste if you have access to the PowerPoint. Okay, let's have a look and see what you've got, shall we? Number 1, it says Mensis December, the month of December, so that's our heading there. Number 2 is a theatrical mask, actually. Although strangely, there's no suggestion that theatrical performances actually take place. I'm not an expert on this matter, but there's no evidence to say that it doesn't take place, but perhaps this is evidence that it does take place. But whatever it is, theatre is not a significant part of this festival. Number 3 is a table with 2 dice, and I think it's 1 or 2 dice tower. So if you remember the image of that gambling table that we've seen from the house in Pompeii, this is a different way of interpreting that table. Of course, gambling is allowed during Saturnalia, so that would be why this might be quite relevant for this time of the year. Okay, number 4 is the little quotation. Hopefully you can make it out, that where it says Argumenta tibi mensis concido december. I give to you the methods or the reasons of celebrating Saturnalia. Oh, sorry, not the reasons or methods of. It's the reasons or methods of December, isn't it? What typically happens in December. Right, number 5. Number 5 is a fire, isn't it? Although number 6 is the torch. And number 5, sorry, must be the hanging birds. They're hung from a little sort of. I quite like it actually. They've managed to make a hook out of that frame. That frames what happens in December. So there's a little hook that comes out of the top of the column on which some dead birds are hung. Perhaps it suggests that this is a gaming season. Gaming is the wrong word, but bird shooting season. I'm not entirely sure. Number 6 is a torch. Perhaps that signifies how dark it is. Number 7 is some heart-shaped ness, unsure of the significance of that. And number 8 is another quotation. And what that quotation says, if you don't mind me going back a little bit, is to say, "Behold, winter nourishes the seeds thrown each year into the ploughed earth, always wet with rain sent from Jupiter. Now let December come once more, the golden festival of Saturn. Now you, slave, are allowed to play with your master." Okay, this dominates the calendar for December, so clearly it must be quite a significant event, perhaps the highlight event of the month of December. So yes, that is the calendar. And now that we've learned all the facts and information that we need to know for Saturnalia, we've come to quiz time. So on the next 2 slides are a quiz. The answers are somewhere within this video, so I'm not going to read the answers out to you. You can check the comments and see if I've provided the, not the comments, the description, and check if I've provided the answers there, but otherwise you should be able to find these in your notes, and if not, check back through it. So, I shall not speak, but I shall show you 2 pages of quizzes, quiz 1 and quiz 2, and you can have a go at them. So here is quiz 1. And here is quiz 2. Okay, one of the things that you might be asked within the exam is thinking about the facts that you've got. And I think one question, one strand of question that might come up with Saturnalia is whether this is a festival that is fit for Saturn. And I think it is. The customs of the festival are specially designed, given that Saturn was usurped by his son. He was a god of sowing, he's the ruler of Latium, and he is the god of time. What I probably should have asked you as well is how this festival is fit for the winter time. So 5 things to consider there. Do pause the video if you need some time to work on it. I will explain some of my answers later on. Okay, Saturn was usurped by Jupiter, his son. He was deposed, dethroned as the king of the god, and Jupiter became the new king of the god. And this refers to a hierarchy is mirrored in the sense that you could argue the slaves were served by the master, and there's a sense of equality throughout the whole festival as well with the gifts exchange. So there's 2 points that you could make there. I suppose the third point is that government is providing for a lot of the people. It's a little bit of a weaker point, but I think the best point, the most significant point here has got to be the fact that the masters are expected to provide some service and to look after the slave on this more than any other day. Okay, Saturn is a god of sowing or agriculture, and I think this has got more to do with time than other things, but it's the time where any thoughts of harvest should have come to an end, but it's also a time where you start to think about sowing the seed for the next cycle of agriculture. So in that sense, the timing of it is appropriate. He was the ruler of Latium, so the fact that this festival is celebrated in the city of Rome, I guess this is more a matter of the fact that this festival is appropriate for the city of Rome and is appropriate for Saturn. I'm sure that the sacrifice and the events would have centered around the altar in front of the Temple of Saturn anyway. And Saturn was the ruler of Latium. So this is an appropriate festival for the city of Rome. And I suppose it's appropriate for Saturn to be celebrated in the area she ruled before. Saturn is a god of time, and this happened in the last month of the year, quite near to the New Year's Eve or the New Year's Day. It is also true that before this date, the daylight hours would have been shrinking, and after this date, the daylight hours would be lengthening. So therefore, it's quite a significant time in terms of the time of the year, and as the god of time, having the festival for him around the day of the winter solstice makes this quite fitting indeed. And the last point, which is not on here, is the fact that this festival takes place in the depths of winter, and I suppose as with many culture, we all just need cheering up in these dark days, don't we? So, how would you find a festival like this? What would you enjoy about it? What would you dislike about it? This is another strand of question that the exam board quite likes to ask, and it might even ask you to compare your opinions of different festivals as well. So do pick out certain aspects of the festival and do consider whether you enjoy that or not. Finally, if you have time, imagine if the current government is considering organising a celebration of Saturnalia. We do have a Prime Minister who studied classics. Some people would not. Whatever your opinion is, just imagine that he's considering organising the celebration of Saturnalia. What sort of modern day events would the Prime Minister organise, and how would modern households celebrate it at home? What we're thinking of is keeping a lot of the principles, a lot of the aspects of celebrating Saturn still there, but we're having a modern take on it. You may also want to consider that modern tastes and appropriateness have changed over time, so some things might need to be changed, something might need to be omitted, but you might also feel that some things should be included, so consider all that as well. I hope you've learned lots about Saturnalia. I hope you've got an opportunity to consider what Saturnalia as well. It remains for me to say at the end of this presentation, Yo Saturnalia! Yo Saturnalia!